We begin the day with U.S. President Trump trying again to limit who can be born an American citizen. 5 weeks ago, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Trump's attempt to deny automatic citizenship to some children born in the United States. Well, now the president is pursuing a narrower approach. 2 new executive orders target so-called birth tourism and seek to limit citizenship for some children born to foreign government employees, people classified as alien enemies, and children in certain commercial surrogacy cases. So is he testing the limits of the Supreme Court, or is he ignoring the court's power altogether? Here's the president and White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Steve Miller.
Steve, maybe you could discuss what we're dealing with on birthright citizenship. We had a very unfortunate decision in the Supreme Court concerning birthright. It was close, but a very, very unfortunate decision. So we're making adjustments because it's very unfair. This was done for a different reason. This was done right after the Civil War. This was for the babies of slaves.
The president is using his authority as commander-in-chief to sign first an executive order using the new ruling the Supreme Court issued to expand the definitions of people who are ineligible for birthright citizenship. That includes, for example, alien enemies of the United States, members of foreign terrorist organizations, and large categories of people who lobby and act on behalf of foreign governments. And so with taking this action, it ensures that large numbers of people who wrongly would be getting birthright citizenship will no longer be eligible for those benefits.
And joining me now is Ilyas Homan, a visiting professor of law at the University of Virginia. Professor, it's good to have you with us. The Supreme Court struck down Trump's first attempt about just a few weeks ago. What has he changed this time that he believes makes this attempt constitutional?
So this order is narrower than the previous one. The previous one sought to deny birthright citizenship to all children born in the United States if the parents were illegal migrants or if they were here on temporary visas. This tries to target people in 4 somewhat narrower categories. One is children of so-called alien enemies, where their parents have been designated as members of supposed terrorist organizations. Another is children of foreign government employees. Yet another is children of so-called birth tourists, people who come to the U.S. for the specific purpose of having a child born in the U.S. to become a U.S. citizen. And then finally, children born in a territory of the U.S. where Congress has not granted citizenship to the children born there by law, which as far as I can tell applies only to children born in American Samoa. But even though this order is narrower than the previous one, I think it's still unconstitutional, at least the vast majority of it.
And why do you think it's unconstitutional? I mean, if I read the 14th Amendment, it says that anyone born in the U.S. and subject to its jurisdiction is a citizen. I mean, that seems rather clear and cut. The president doesn't think so.
Yeah, so all of this comes down to the interpretation of those words, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. I think the Supreme Court, in a decision issued in June, made clear that that includes everybody whose parents are in the United States and they're required to obey U.S. law. So it excludes only a few groups, most obviously children of diplomats who have diplomatic immunity. The president and his lawyers probably have various arguments to try to say that children born of members of these 4 categories, that they somehow their parents are not truly subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. But the bottom line is, I think there is no good arguments that could possibly justify this. And the types of arguments that have been used in the previous case were rejected by a majority of the Supreme Court, and I don't think that they have any meaningfully better arguments for children born to parents in these 4 particular categories, with, of course, the exception of those foreign government employees that really are diplomats with diplomatic immunity and therefore are exempt from obeying American law.
Professor, what do you make of what Stephen Miller said in the last 24 hours about the 14th Amendment? Basically, he said that the 14th Amendment, it came out of the U.S. Civil War, and it was meant to ensure that the children of former slaves were American citizens. He says it began there and it stopped there.
Yeah, so that's just simply not true. It is correct that the children of former slaves were the principal group that was supposed to be protected, but the wording of the amendment is much broader than that. As we said before, it applies to all children born in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction. Moreover, all of the arguments that the administration made in the previous case and is likely to make here are ones that, if applied consistently, would in fact have denied citizenship to many freed slaves. For example, they argued, well, this doesn't apply to people whose parents came to the U.S. illegally. If that is true, it would not have applied to many former slaves, because many slaves were actually brought into the United States illegally. And they had various other arguments, but all of them had the implication that many former slaves and their children would have been denied citizenship. So Miller is both wrong in the narrow point that he makes, saying that this is only for freed slaves, but even to the extent that he's correct, it still undermines the administration's position, because all the arguments they make are ones that, if taken seriously, would in fact have denied citizenship to many freed slaves, and in many cases also to Black Americans who were not freed slaves, but who before the 14th Amendment were denied citizenship because of the Supreme Court's decision in the Dred Scott case in 1857.
Only 5 Supreme Court justices explicitly said that birthright citizenship was constitutionally guaranteed. I think it was Justice Kavanaugh who relied on federal law. Does that narrow split give Trump even a little bit of an opening here?
Doubtful. First, obviously, the issue of whether birthright citizenship is protected by a congressional law for these groups would arise in this case as well. And so Kavanaugh ultimately voted to strike down the previous Trump executive order, even though it was just based on a congressional law rather than on the 14th Amendment. Second, the 5 justices who ruled based on the amendment are still a majority of the court, and they set down a fairly clear rule under which almost all of the people covered by the current executive order are still entitled to birthright citizenship. So we can never know for sure. Maybe one or more justices will change their minds, but it seems unlikely that they would change them in a major way.
The Trump administration is also targeting what it calls birth tourism, but visa rules already allow officials, customs agents, immigration officials to refuse people traveling into the U.S. who are primarily doing that to give birth. So what does this new order, what does it actually change?
So there's 2 executive orders. There's one that tries to exclude birth tourists, and maybe that one just doesn't change very much, though they may make more efforts to try to exclude them. But then there's also the executive order that we talked about a moment ago, which says that if birth tourists do get into the country, then their children would not be entitled to birthright citizenship. And that part is clearly unconstitutional under the Supreme Court's decision that they issued in June. Indeed, one of the dissenting justices, Justice Alito, actually emphasized this and made this point a major focus of his dissent. So it's very obvious, I think, that executive order, the one denying citizenship to children of birth tourists, is unconstitutional. I would add also that birth tourism is a vastly overblown problem. Probably only a few thousand people each year that have children in that way. And to the extent that they do, I don't see how it does any harm to the United States. If children grow up in a freer, wealthier society, they will be happier. They will contribute to our economy. So not only is there not actually all that much birth tourism, but it's not actually a real problem at all.
Okay. Professor Stillman, unfortunately, we're out of time, but we appreciate your valuable insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.